Hello, everybody. My name is Dan Skipbound, and this is the Top 5 Weekly, where we discuss a topic. We run it down from 5 to 1. Actor, actress, director, genre. You know the drill. This whole month of May, we're going to be doing a classic topics. Jimmy Stewart, classic musicals, Billy Wilder, and on this episode, we're going to be doing Grace Kelly. And I don't do this show all by myself. I got my good buddy here who volunteered to talk about Grace Kelly with me. Andrew, welcome back to the Top 5 Weekly. And are you glad to be talking about this topic?
I am. I'm glad to be back here once again on Top 5 Weekly. It's a topic that when Dan asked me about, I said, sure, why not? I like Grace Kelly. I've seen many of her movies. Why not just spend some time talking about it?
Yeah, I was the same. I mean, when I was going to originally do classic in August, but we have no movies. So we have to do episodes of the Top 5 Week. We have to keep the Top 5 Weekly going. So I decided to push up classic month to May. So we have some episodes in May to do. And over the years, I've been watching Grace Kelly's movies, and some of them really resonate with me. And I was like, all right, we're going to do classic female. Who should we do? I was like, I want to talk about Grace Kelly because I like her. So I got someone that wanted to talk about Grace Kelly with me. And I'm glad you volunteered for this episode with me, Andrew. I always go second. So we always like to go first, have the guest go first. So you're up with your number 5.
Number 5. Okay. So what is interesting about Grace Kelly is she doesn't have the largest filmography when it comes to films to pick from. I think she only did about 11 films in her career. She had a very short career spanning basically from the early 50s to the late 50s, essentially. But the one that I picked for number 5 is the film that she actually won her only Academy Award for, and that is The Country Girl.
We're gonna hold on just a second.
That's why I hesitated.
Yep. I have The Country Girl a little bit lower than that. And we might have the same situation here because my number 5 is look, one of the directors she got to work with, I guess you say a bunch, but 3 times was Alfred Hitchcock.
Yeah.
And one of the Alfred Hitchcock movies that she did was Dial M for Murder.
I have that on my list.
Okay,
I'll get rid of the suspense. I have all of the Hitchcocks on my list, so just to cut some time.
So do I.
You kind of can't avoid that. She predominantly worked with Alfred Hitchcock throughout her career.
All right, so we had just a quick lag there. So in the video, and just in case if you're watching, there was a quick lag there. I have all the Hitchcock movies on my list as well. Obviously, we have them in different places. So we're going to go back to you. See if we can get actually, it was my number 4 was your number 5. So just want to talk about The Country Girl since it was my 4 and your 5.
Why not while we're here? So I said, The Country Girl is her only lone Academy Award-winning film. The film came out in 1954, I believe. Yeah, which I believe is the same year as another film we're going to be talking about, directed by George Seaton. The film also stars Bing Crosby as well as William Holden. And the film is about William Holden plays this director, and he's running a play. I think it's on Broadway or off-Broadway, something like that. And he wants the Bing Crosby character to be the lead in it because I think they have a past relationship with one another. The problem is the Bing Crosby character has a problem with alcoholism, and he just can't. He's got a lot of internal demons because the alcoholism kind of feeds and dulls and whatnot. But Grace Kelly plays his wife, who's also someone who is very active in his life to kind of keep him afloat. And the film is really about this contentious relationship between the William Holden character, Bing Crosby, as well as the Grace Kelly character. And they're all kind of like, intertwining with one another. And basically Grace Kelly and William Holden characters are fighting over Bing Crosby's character and what's best for him and how to function and all that kind of stuff. And it's really fascinating the way they talk to one another. And I'll say this, it's a much more dramatic film and dramatic performance from Grace Kelly than I ever really remember seeing from her. It's very different than I think any of her other films that I've personally seen. And it was really surprising. And she carried it well, very, very well. I think the acting overall in the film is the best part of the film, and she's part of that best part. She's really good in this film.
Yeah, no, I absolutely agree. She's a bit of an overbearing wife. And, you know, Bing Crosby is one of those guys that he controls the screen. When you're watching a movie that he's on, he's like the life of the party. And this is one of those movies where he's not that way, where he's kind of like, he doesn't believe in himself. But there is a tragedy that happens in their lives that causes him to be this kind of dour, down in the dumps kind of guy, and his wife is the one thing in his life that kind of keeps him going. And the William Holden character doesn't seem to realize he doesn't understand. So he's getting into these arguments with Georgie Elgin, which is Grace Kelly's character, and she doesn't want to give away why her husband is the way he is. But for the play, they have to kick her out and send her back to New York. She is such an overbearing character in the movie. She really does control the scenes that she's in, whether she's with William Holden or Bing Crosby. And yeah, I can see why she won an Academy Award, because she's totally different than any other movie that she's played. We'll give away. We're gonna give a little bit of Hollywood secrets away right here, Andrew. This movie is a black and white movie, and they kind of make her kind of look like a homely kind of housewife type of character. If you've seen Grace Kelly in other movies that are color movies, she is a gorgeous woman. They give her the most beautiful clothes to wear, and you're like, yeah, that's a movie star. But in a lot of movies, the movies that win the Academy Awards, the ones where the woman kind of downplays the look, she kind of plays an angry mother or an angry wife or a villain or something. And that's what Grace Kelly really does in The Country Girl.
Yeah, and it's famously, I think, famously, I think a lot of people are upset about this film because Grace Kelly had won the Best Actress Oscar over Judy Garland in A Star Is Born, and that was supposed to be like Judy Garland's like big comeback movie, and it was supposed to be her Oscar movie, and she was pretty much supposed to win that Oscar, and then Grace Kelly kind of swooped in and took it away from her. I mean, I would say this, it's kind of, Judy Garland probably should have won if I'm being personally honest, but it's interesting, like Dan said, is where they really dressed her down, because in most of what we see from Grace Kelly, what I think Grace Kelly is remembered is this glamorized, iconic image that's on screen. You know, the cameras really loved her, and they really knew how to light her and dress her very, very well to just like shine on screen.
And in this movie, they don't do that.
No, they go the opposite way,
yeah.
And it still works because her acting is so good.
So good, yeah. Absolutely. So that was my number 4. We couldn't talk about my number 5, but we're going to go back to Andrew for his number 4.
My number 4 is High Noon.
High Noon. We're going to have to hold off there,
okay.
Andrew. We're going to hold off just a little bit on that. So we talked about my number 4 already. So we're going to go back to you for your number 3.
My number 3, coincidentally, is I think your number 5, which would be Dial M for Murder.
All right, well that's perfect then. So we can get into discussing Dial M for Murder. Go ahead.
Yes, we can. So Dial M for Murder, like we said, is an Alfred Hitchcock film. Came out in 1954 as well, coincidentally. And this is kind of a really classic Hitchcock film. It's got twists and turns. Essentially, the premise of this film is that it centers around a married couple. And at one point, the Grace Kelley character obviously plays the wife in the relationship. I believe that she had an extramarital affair with somebody, and the husband found out about it, but they've since reconciled, or as she thinks that they've reconciled. But the husband is actually plotting behind her back to have her murdered. And it wouldn't be a Hitchcock film, I guess, without a little backstabbing, little dark, seedy murder thrust into there. But what ends up happening is through a series of situations is that she ends up, spoiler alert, like she ends up foiling the plans and killing the person that's supposed to be killing her, and now she's on trial for murder, and it's a whole big kind of like how is she going to get out of it, because like the truth has to be uncovered and all that kind of stuff. It's a really good film. What is interesting about this film is when it was originally shown in theaters back in the day, it was shown in 3D. Because back in the 50s, they had a whole like 3D wave of movies. I've said this many, many times. 3D kind of comes and goes every couple of decades. It's like pops up, goes away, pops up, goes away. It popped up a few years ago, and now it's gone once again. Will it end up coming back? I don't think so. I think it's kind of done, unfortunately, for some. But there is an actual 3D Blu-ray version of this movie that you can buy, and you can watch it if you still have the 3D capabilities. And it's very interesting the way the movie is shot, because the way Hitchcock shot it was like he had things in the background and then people being shot in the foreground to give that sense of 3D. It's really, really fascinating the way it looks, and the 3D looks very good on a modern, television setup. But what really so it's got all of that intrigue, all of the twists and turns, the little macabreness in there, and the film also stars Ray Milland and Robert Cummings as well. And yeah, it's a Hitchcock film that I don't think gets talked about enough. It kind of slightly gets overshadowed by a lot of the other films that came out during that 50s window of like Alfred Hitchcock greatness.
Yeah, no, you're absolutely right. It does get overshadowed by some of the great, some other ones we're going to be talking about. Margo is this kind of beautiful woman. She's married to this guy, but she's friends with this other guy. And the husband of Margo, Ray Milland, he thinks he knows, in fact, there's something going on with the Robert Cummings character and her. So he plots, he basically finds this guy that he can get to help him commit murder of his wife. And there's a detective that, for whatever reason, he's not believing that she'd been to court already. She's been in jail already. He still, after all this, doesn't believe that she committed this murder. And he was that guy is going to be in another, we're going to be talking about another movie with that actor in it in a little while. We haven't got to that yet, I'm sure, because both of us will probably have that movie on our list.
There's a good chance.
A different Hitchcock film. But yeah, Ray Milland, I'll tell you what, that first scene where he gets with the guy and he goes over all the details of the murder, you're like, wow, this is really cool. And then you have that detective who unravels it at the end. Grace Kelley isn't like a huge part of this movie. She's in the beginning a little bit, and then she's in the ending a little bit. And the weirdest part is she's like this glamorous, just like goddess looking woman in the beginning. And then at the end, she's all disheveled because she's been in jail. She has no makeup on. She's wearing all these drab clothes. You're like, wow, holy crap. She's completely different looking. But she doesn't know what to do after what she's been going through, what she's gone through, because time has passed between the beginning of the movie and the end of the movie. A lot of time has passed. But yeah, her name is Margo, and yeah, that's Dial M for Murder. I like her. I like her in Dial M for Murder. It's just not like one of my top one. So I kind of shuffled my list around a little bit, and I put it at number 5.
Okay. I think, do we still have to go to your number 3?
Yeah, we got to go to my number 3, which was your number 4.
Okay.
My number 3 is your number 4, but since it's my number 3, I'm going to talk about it. All right. So my number 3 is Amy Kane, High Noon. Amy Kane, the wife, we see right at the beginning of this movie, Amy is marrying Will Kane, the sheriff of Hattiesville. I think it's called Hattiesville, this little sleepy little country town called Hattiesville. And they're all happy, and then they get this news that these guys are coming. These guys are over by the train tracks, and they're waiting on this guy named, of all names. And you know what? If you put the pictures up of that guy and the guy that I'm going to say the name of, you're like, wow, they kind of look alike. Frank Miller. The guy's name is Frank Miller. If you put up a comic book character, writer, artist, Frank Miller, and you put up a picture of this guy, they kind of look alike, which is the weirdest friggin' thing. I was like, man, he looks like Frank Miller. You know, if you know who Frank Miller is, the comic book and writer and whatever. So the whole idea is that they're going to leave town. Amy and Will, they're getting in a carriage and they're bolting out of town. And then Will decides, you know what? I'm the sheriff. I know there's a new sheriff coming tomorrow, but you know what? I'm going back. I'm going to make sure that this guy doesn't wreak havoc on this town. And I guess because he's been the sheriff for 5 years, he kind of cleaned up the town and he got rid of Frank and put him in jail. But I guess he got out and now he wants to come back and get revenge on Will Kane and the townspeople. The problem is nobody wants to help him. He's all alone. Andrew, he's all like the one guy that will help him wants his job. So then he decides he's not going to help him because he wants to be the sheriff. And that's Lloyd Bridges.
Mm-hmm.
You know, Lloyd Bridges wants to be the boss, you know, but he's not ready. He's young, you know. Then some of his other buddies, the old sheriff played by Lon Chaney, he's like, yeah, I got bad knuckles. I got arthritis. I'd be no good to you. No good to you. But Grace Kelley, she's kind of while all this is going on, she's finding out about Will because she really didn't know a lot about Will, Amy Kane. So she starts finding out about what type of person he is. But she's still going to take the train and get the hell out of there. You know, I said a lot, Andrew. What do you have to say about High Noon?
Yeah, High Noon is one of the all-time classic westerns, I think. Directed by Fred Zinnemann, came out in 1952, starring Gary Cooper, like Dan says, starring Grace Kelley as well. Lon Chaney Jr. is in it. Harry Morgan is in it. Lloyd Bridges. A very early role from Lee Van Cleef. He plays one of the bad guys waiting at the train station for a guy to come in. So Lee Van Cleef is in the film. I think we did an episode of 52 Must See.
On High Noon?
We did do High Noon.
Oh, okay.
We may have done it. You back in the day, you, Steven, and I, or there was some combination of that.
Oh, I wouldn't doubt that. I mean, High Noon is a great film.
Yeah, High Noon is a great film. And what High Noon is most remembered for is that it's an allegory for what was going on in Hollywood, post World War II with the House Un-Americans Committee, McCarthyism, the blacklisting and the exile of many actors, actresses, producers, filmmakers, being kicked out of Hollywood, because the idea is that, this lone guy can't get any help from anyone who was his peers. They all turned his back on him, kind of like how a lot of people in Hollywood turned their backs on certain people and whatnot. And the film is famously known for being loathed and hated by John Wayne so much, who of course was all about hunting down all of those people in Hollywood back then. He was kind of a jerk, kind of an asshole when it came to things like that. And he famously hated this movie so much to the point where they remade this movie as Rio Bravo years later, and it was the exact opposite, where a bad guy's coming to town, but everyone in the town is now helping, the sheriff or the marshal portrayed by John Wayne in that film, in fighting all the bad guys, as opposed to High Noon, where it's just like this Lone Ranger type mentality. So yeah, there was a lot of politics back then, as well as now. Those things really don't go away. But that's what this film is really kind of remembered for a lot. And also, it's a great Western, shot beautifully in black and white. Gary Cooper is a great actor. He's really good in this film. And it's a young early role from Grace Kelly. She's very young in this film.
which is great.
Yeah, and she's
Standing up to
really good,
well,
especially towards the end where she has to decide whether to leave or stand by Gary Cooper as like the only one willing to help him. It's a really, really excellent film.
yeah. One of the things before we get into some of these, if you watch Grace Kelly in her movies, she stands toe to toe with some of the greats of all time. Bing Crosby, Gary Cooper, a couple other people we're going to name before this episode's over. And it's not like they're up here, she's down here. It's like this. And if you listen to the dialogue, how she stands with these other actors as well. She's not just this gorgeous woman in beautiful clothes and all that. She gets a lot of great lines, and she stands toe to toe with Gary Cooper because she's like, dude, I don't want you to die. Are you really making the right choice? And if you're going to stay here and do this, then I'm getting the hell out of here. But then she realizes once she talks to people about Will Kane, she realizes the type of person he is. And she's like, well, you know what? I'm going to stick around. I'm going to help him. And that's what a great wife is. And that's part of what I love about the Amy Kane character in this movie, because she stands by her man. And she was like, if he's going to die, then I'm going to stay there with him and I'm going to help him as much as I can because I'm his wife, and that's what I love about Amy Kane. And that's what, I just absolutely love High Noon. I mean, I just can't say enough about High Noon. Okay, so that's going back to, that was my number 3. Have we got to your number 3 yet? I forget.
Yeah, we did. My number 3 was Dial M for Murder. We talked about
so
that.
We're good. We're all caught up. Now we're going to number 2 for you.
Yep. My number 2 is To Catch a Thief.
To Catch a Thief. Hold on there. We're just probably swapping. We probably just swapped.
Yeah, I bet you we did.
My number 2 is Rear Window.
You can assume what my number 1 is.
All right, so let's just do Catch a Thief first.
All right.
And then we'll do Rear Window afterwards, since it's both of our 1s and 2s.
Well, yeah, To Catch a Thief, Alfred Hitchcock once again. If you probably haven't noticed by now, I just basically made the top 3 Alfred Hitchcock trilogy, essentially. That's what it is. Alfred Hitchcock, 1955, stars one of my all-time favorite actors. Like, I'm talking like top 5 favorites in Cary Grant, maybe top 3. I just love him so much. And this film, of course, you pair him up with Grace Kelly, and you basically have 2 of the most, beautiful looking people in Hollywood back then as this duo. And the plot of this film is interesting because Cary Grant's character is playing a retired jewel thief, and this takes place in kind of, I want to say,
it's the French Riviera.
Yeah, the French Riviera. I was gonna say south of French Riviera, place, those types of places. And so, like, it looks gorgeous and lush because the film is shot in Technicolor, I believe. And what happens is, he's a retired jewel thief, and someone basically copycats him and does a robbery, and the authorities basically think he's come out of retirement and has done it. So it's basically up to him, and accompanied by Grace Kelly, to find out the truth and figure out who was actually behind this and clear his name. But they have a wonderful romantic, playful chemistry in like Monte Cassino and stuff like that, and they're just like, it's really absolutely just gorgeously well shot and fantastic, and they play off one another so damn well. I just absolutely adore this film.
Yeah, I'm sure I saw it when I was a younger person. You see so many movies, I just forget sometimes what I've seen, what I haven't seen. But I watched it again today, and I was absolutely blown away by it. I mean, once again, Grace Kelly toe to toe with one of the greats of all time, Cary Grant. And a guy we mentioned, someone I alluded to from Dial M for Murder, was also in To Catch a Thief. And of all the names this guy could have, I mean, it's so weird. His name is John Williams. And in To Catch a Thief, he's an inspector. And in Dial M for Murder, he's a detective. He's a Scotland Yard detective. But he's fantastic in both films. His name is John Williams. I just wanted to make sure I brought that guy up because I thought he deserved to be discussed. But Grace Kelley, she's just glamorous. She's, the scenes where she's on the beach and she's just sunbathing and stuff like this. But then there's scenes where she's like, hey, I don't want you to leave. I don't want you to get caught. I love you. I want you to be with me. Like, she's telling Cary Grant, I love you. You need to be with me. Don't go off and do this or that or the other because I love you, And she's like this ritzy, rich woman. She's like, her mother owns oil fields and she's rich. She's got all this money. And this guy's a thief and, but she's commanding the screen with Cary Grant, Andrew. And that's what's so great about her. Even though she's got such a small filmography, you look at the movie she's in and she just controls the screen when she's on screen with these guys.
Well, yeah, I think they knew, at least the Hollywood higher-ups knew right away to pair her with very strong leading men. Because she was a strong leading lady, and they would just, you have this power duo to carry these films. Because back in the 40s and 50s, the stars were the ones who carried the films. Like, that's the way they sold these movies. That's kind of how they structured these movies around them, because they had the Hollywood studio system where they had all these actors and actresses under contracts. Kind of, I compared it on our podcast. Cinema Discovery Project, cheap plug there, where it's like, it was kind of like sports, where it's like free agents. You sign somebody for a couple of years, so then you basically control what they do, essentially. And then, you try to prevent them from being a free agent and going over here. That's kind of how it was back then. So you wanted to get the biggest stars in your stable, whether you were Warner Brothers or MGM or Paramount or Columbia or whoever, and Grace Kelley was a huge star.
Yeah, she really was. And it's movies like, Dial M for Murder, Catch a Thief, and the movie we're going to talk about next, because it was my number 2 and it was your number 1. Right. So take it away. Rear Window. I mean, we in spoiler, we did do a Jimmy Stewart episode,
right?
This classic month of episodes. So we already talked about Rear Window, but we're going to talk about it in the form of Grace Kelley this time.
Yeah, and I mean, I famously left it off of my top 5, knowing full well that doing this Grace Kelley episode, I'd be able to talk about it. I mean, just because Rear Window is such an iconic, classic, almost quintessential Alfred Hitchcock film. We talked about it so much, but I mean, if you've never seen Rear Window, it's so interesting. It's been parodied and referenced so many times, so chances are you know it pretty well without actually seeing the movie, because it's just that important in pop culture. But basically, Jimmy Stewart and Grace Kelley, they have this relationship. He is a photographer, like a news photographer, so he travels around all kinds of places. She, I believe, works in the fashion industry, so she's always dressed in these just gorgeous dresses and ensembles and all this kind of stuff. And they have a bit of a contentious relationship because she's rather stationary when it comes to her life in I believe New York. Would make sense because of fashion, and he's always traveling. But of course, he's laid up in the movie now because he's broken his leg, and he's kind of bored. So he's just kind of looking around his apartment complex, and he's seeing all the people. There's always the great POV shots through the binoculars, going through the different apartments and seeing who's doing what and the different personalities. But he comes up with this idea, or he believes that one of his neighbors has killed his wife, and he tends to keep thinking that to the point where he expresses his thoughts to the Grace Kelley character, and they kind of go on a little like couple investigation. It's kind of like The Thin Man, but in an apartment complex a bit. Yeah. They have that relationship that, The Thin Man, the William Powell and Myrna Loy detective to couple relationship, which is really, really fascinating, and they work really well together. Thelma Ritter's in the film as well, and she's great as some certain comic relief. But Grace Kelley, once again, just fills up the whole screen. I mentioned on the Jimmy Stewart episode, there's the shot when he opens his eyes, and all you get is this POV shot of Grace Kelley just glowing and taking up the whole screen. It's one of the most magical shots I think I've ever seen in a movie. It's so perfectly done, and it so perfectly captures the iconic nature of Grace Kelley. She was just a gorgeous icon on screen.
No, you're absolutely right. I mean, she is the epitome of what Hollywood is all about.
The glamour, the glitz and the glamour.
Yeah, and they put her in the best fashions to make her just stand out. Not that she wouldn't stand out because she's beautiful and she's got beautiful blonde hair and everything, and she's got a great voice too. It's like wow. I mean, I hope this doesn't sound right. It's like if you could make a woman in a factory to make the perfect one, you'd make Grace Kelley. That's what you would make.
It's kind of like the plot from Weird Science.
Yeah.
And I mean, a lot of those actresses who they tried to build up their, sell them for their looks were also really good actresses as well. Unfairly, I think Marilyn Monroe, who's considered the iconic of most iconic, attractive women or selling sexuality for to make money off of movies, she was also a really good actress as well, and she never got her due because of it. And I think Grace Kelley doesn't really get her due for the most part because of it. Unfortunately, when it comes to the way Hollywood is they'll kind of force you to do the same thing over and over again because that's what their moneymaker is. So if the people want that, we're just going to have you do that. You know what I mean? So they kind of pigeonhole Grace Kelley in a lot of similar roles over time. But when you paired her up with Alfred Hitchcock, you get the combination of a great filmmaker and a great film to go along with to really show her talents. And that's kind of why we talk about so much Hitchcock on this episode.
Yeah, she's in 3 Hitchcock films, and she's great, and she stands out in all 3 of them. I think she stands out more in To Catch a Thief and Rear Window than she does in Dial M for Murder because she's great at the beginning. Then we don't see her for a while. Then she's all this kind of like schlubby-looking lady with drab clothes and no makeup and all this because she was supposed to be in prison in Dial M for Murder. So, but yeah. Raymond Burr, great villain in Rear Window. Perry Mason, Ironside. Also one of the things I love is that she's right there with Jimmy Stewart. She's right by his side. Whenever he needs something, hey, go over there and look in here. Go and look in this guy's apartment. You're like, really? You're going to send her all the way over there while you're freaking knocked up with a broken leg and she's going to get killed by this guy and she's sneaking around the guy's apartment and all this stuff. You're like, man, no, not Grace Kelley. We don't want to see something bad happen.
It's interesting that you say that because there's the very last shot of this movie, when the last shot we see of Grace Kelley is she's not dressed in the glamorous clothing that we've seen. So perhaps she's relented a little bit to the Jimmy Stewart character in terms of like, being more on his, like, I wouldn't say schlubby level, but being more on his level. But what is really so interesting about the situation is that she's reading a fashion magazine. You know what I mean? So the way Hitchcock has, ended her character is that she can have her foot firmly based in both worlds. She can have it all, which is and the way he showed that was just through that shot. You know what I mean? There's no explanation. There's no big emotional scene or anything like that. It's like pure visual filmmaking.
Yeah. And the other thing I wanted to say too is, for all the moments in these movies where she stands toe to toe with these guys, she's also a very, she can play the romantic character too. The love interest where she feels something for these guys, and she does feel for Jimmy Stewart because he's kind of laid up with a broken leg. There's scenes where she's making him lunch and she's kind of hanging out and having a drink with him and stuff to make him feel better because he's just sitting there feeling bad for himself because he broke his leg, trying to photograph cars in a race at the beginning of the movie. He gets hit while he's a photographer and he was photographing cars at a race and he got hit and that's how he broke his leg. You don't see it in the movie, but they
mention it.
Yeah,
they mention it, and there was.
Then there's a car. I want to tell you.
Oh, yeah.
There's a car chase in To Catch a. There's a car chase in To Catch a Thief that is like, wow. You feel like you're in that car with them, and you're gonna go off a freaking cliff. And she's up there driving like a madman. Grace Kelley is. And they're like, what the heck is this real? Are they really driving?
No, if I remember correctly, I mean, the way they shot stuff back then is like a lot of the stuff you see where it's like exterior shots of overhead two cars chasing each other was all like stunt people. It's all shot by like second or third unit, and all the stuff where it's like two people sitting in a car and they have the rear projection behind them, that's all done in studio, probably by Hitchcock himself. I think that's what I assume. Because
Okay.
Hitchcock hated shooting on location anywhere. Hated
Oh,
it.
well, he
He
sure
loved the
did.
studio setting. That's why in Rare Window, that whole thing's a set.
Yeah, oh, I
The
knew
whole
that.
thing is set,
But,
which is
but
which is
like, how could
crazy.
you not? How could you not want to shoot in the French Riviera, though, Andrew,
I
or
know. I do.
San
I would.
Francisco during that time?
Well,
I
yeah,
mean,
he shot. Well, Vertigo. He did shoot in San Francisco. Yeah.
I mean, that looked like the French Riviera to me, man. I mean, it would look like they were on the beaches, look like they were in stuff. I'd be shocked if a lot of that
Yeah,
wasn't.
I think
Location.
most of that stuff was probably done there. But when it came to like the car chase stuff and whatnot, um, as cool as it looked, I think it was done by second unit. Um, but yeah, that's the
Yeah,
Catch a Thief in Rare Window.
yeah. So that's our five. And I have one honorable mention. I'm sure you got
Oh,
the same
I
honorable
got a
mention
couple.
as me. You got a couple. All right. Discuss your honorable mentions.
Well, I was gonna say Mogambo, which
Yeah,
is
I didn't see that. I've
the
never
John
seen that.
Ford film from 1953, which is stars Clark Gable, Ava Gardner, and Grace Kelly. Talk about a gorgeous cast. That's a movie that actually was shot on location in like the African jungle because it
Ooh.
takes place in like a safari,
Oh,
and yeah, it's actually a remake of a movie I think called Red Dust, which also starred Clark Gable in the same role. But I think Jean Harlow was in that film. But Grace Kelly plays like she's having kind of like an extramarital affair with Clark Gable's character. Like her and her husband go on safari, and and Clark Gable and Ava Gardner have like this romantic like fiery relationship, and it's all four of them kind of like playing this. I wouldn't say it's not a love triangle, obviously, but it's kind of like a love square, I guess. And it's good. It's directed by John Ford, and it's surprising because John Ford did do more movies that weren't westerns. Like he did like World War II like action movies, and he did Mogambo. So
yeah,
yeah,
I've never seen it. When we were doing this episode, I was thinking, oh, I gotta see that. I gotta see that before, and I haven't got around to seeing
yeah.
it.
She was also in she was also in High Society. High Society, which was directed by Charles Waters, came out in 1956. I think it was her last film actually
Oh, was it?
before she got married to the Prince of
Monaco.
Monaco, and she became royalty, Grace of Monaco.
Grace of Monaco, yeah.
Yeah, and because she had an uncredited role in a film after that in 1966, and then a television thing, and then a short, and then of course, unfortunately, she died in 1982 in a car accident. But High Society, I think, was her last like kind of real production, and that film is a remake of The Philadelphia Story, which starred coincidentally Cary Grant, Jimmy Stewart, and Katharine Hepburn. So see those connections there. But that film, but High Society starred Bing Crosby and Frank Sinatra as well.
Yeah.
So yet again, big stars, like we said.
Yeah, I mean, she was in all her movies. She was in with all these huge. She basically did the gauntlet of like the biggest stars in Hollywood at that time. She was in a movie with all of them. It seemed like,
in a very short amount of time.
In a very short amount of time, yeah, like 10 years, like you said, about 6, 7, 8, 9, 10 years in there somewhere. And yeah, I was going to say that's the only one I had was High Society. Once again, she's gorgeous in great clothes, and then, oh, God forbid, she's in a triangle between Frank Sinatra and Bing Crosby. And Bing Crosby in this kind of schlubby old guy that is down on his luck and all this stuff. He's the Bing Crosby that
Yeah. He plays her ex-husband, who's like this wealthy, dapper guy and whatnot. And Frank Sinatra plays like this reporter.
Yeah.
And of course, you're not going to have Bing Crosby and Frank Sinatra in a movie not have them sing, because that's probably why they had him in there.
Oh yeah, you knew. Philadelphia Story. There's no singing in it.
No.
But they turn it into, with High Society, they turn it into a musical.
Right.
And Grace Kelly, if if you watched any of her movies, you know, which we have, she's not it. She doesn't do the singing.
I don't believe she was in any musicals. No.
So for her to be in a movie with these guys, it was different for her career because, you know, she didn't do singing. She was a dramatic actress, and she didn't do the song and dance and the musicals and all that kind of stuff. So for her to be in a movie with these guys, it was a rarity in her career. It was. But yeah, so those were that was my honorable mention and your 2 honorable mentions. All right, Andrew, go down your list from 5 to 1.
Okay, my number 5 is The Country Girl. My number 4 is High Noon. My number 3 is Dial M for Murder. Number 2 is To Catch a Thief. And number 1 is Rear Window.
And my number 5 is Dial M for Murder. Number 4 is The Country Girl. Number 3 is High Noon. Hold on, so I'm going to redo this. Dial M for Murder, she plays Margo Wendis. The Country Girl, she plays Georgie Elgin. High Noon, she plays Amy Kane. Rear Window was my number 2, Lisa Fremont. And my number 1 was To Catch a Thief, Frances Stevens. Andrew, where can you be found?
You can find me on Twitter at Cabzilla06, as well as my YouTube channel, Cabzilla Productions, and as well as my podcast, along with my co-host, Stephen Billings, Cinema Discovery Project, which is on Apple Podcasts, as well as Podbean.
That's right, because that's where I listen to the Cinema Discovery on Podbean, because I don't have Apple Podcasts.
Wherever you can, listen to it.
Yeah, I listen to it. I don't listen to it every week because sometimes I forget, but then I realize I have to go back and look. I have an episode to listen to. Like I have one right now queued up, and I haven't listened to it because I've been watching all these classic movies the last couple of days. So I haven't listened to the podcast, and I know I should, but hopefully maybe tomorrow while I'm at work, I'll listen to it. You can find me at Dan Skip Allen on Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, and Pinterest. Or I'm a film critic here in Florida. I write for a website called disappointmentmedia.com. That's DISIPPIONTS. No S. Why do I keep wanting to add the S? DISIPPIONTMEDIA.com. Disappointmentmedia.com. Right now, there's not a lot of movies out in theaters. I have been doing some retrospectives, some anniversaries. I've done High Fidelity, 20 years. I did Pretty Woman, 20 years. The death of Brandon Dennehy. I did a review of Rambo. Jackie Robinson Day this past week. I did a kind of a combination of a review of Jackie Robinson's story and 42. In May, this month, when this comes out, you can check out my 25th anniversary of Braveheart, my 20th anniversary of Gladiator. Plus, in the future, I'm going to be doing every James Bond movie. I'm going to be reviewing every single James Bond movie leading up to No Time to Die. So you can read a lot of what I've written, and in the future, you can check out some of my articles and movie reviews. And obviously, you can check out the Top 5 Weekly every week. Like I said, we're going to be doing Jimmy Stewart, Grace Kelly, Billy Wilder, and classic musicals all through the month of May because there's really no movies out for us to review. So I'm trying to cover that up by doing classic episodes. So for Andrew and myself, good night, everybody.